Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Random Drop, and today I want to talk about my most anticipated game of the year, Metaphor Refantazio. Let's get into it.
Hey everybody, before we get started, I just wanted to say if you enjoy our content and want to stay up to date with our videos, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thanks. So, on to the video.
So, a little bit about myself. I have been a Persona fan since the PS2 release of Persona 4. Or not the PS2 release, but the anime release of Persona 4. So by then, Persona 3 Portable had come out and whatnot. I got into the series after watching the anime and watching my roommate play through Persona 4 PS2 and having a blast just watching him and going through that story and seeing all the twists and turns and the social link aspect. Eventually, when the Vita came out, I went and played Persona 3 Portable, which quickly became one of my favorite games ever, actually. And Persona 3 Reloaded is just an addition on top of that. Charters didn't age well, but the core story and cast of that game are still my favorite in the whole Persona series. And a lot of the messaging and tone of Persona 3 are still what I think best represents what's good about the Persona series. If you play Persona 1 and 2, a lot of that darker tone is still there. Still praying for the day where we get a Persona 2 remake or something like that. But hey, maybe one day. Always wanted this team or the creators of Persona to go to college or do something different. And I think that's what I'm realizing Metaphor Refantazio is, as it is taking the Persona formula in a lot of ways into a fantasy setting, but also shedding a lot of things they've been relying on for quite a while, like the school setting and it being focused on teenagers. You are playing adults in this game. I think the main character is 18 from what I remember, but young adults anyways, right? And this game is set in a world that is very dark and brutal. I was surprised by one of the quests in the game where you're told to save someone and then you don't. You actually don't. And the way the character reacts to what happened and all that, like, yeah, that's like how a person would react, not being able to save a friend slash acquaintance. So it brings a lot of that older Persona stuff, like from Persona 2 and so forth, and a lot of the Shin Megami stuff, and blending it into this new form, which is Metaphor Refantazio. It is that mix of, hey, all the mechanics and things we learned from the Persona series and how relationships work and how we want to pace dungeons and all that. Let's bring a lot of that storytelling that we kind of left behind. Get rid of a lot of the goofiness. There's still jokes and goofiness in this game, but not so outright like it was in Persona 4 and Persona 5. I've played 8 hours of the game so far, and I am totally hooked on what's going on. I'm totally invested at this point. And a great thing about this demo and what they've learned from their past mistakes is that this game kind of just starts with a bang. Shin Megami Tensei 5 kind of starts with a bang as well and immediately gets into gameplay, but story is a lot more lax in that game, and it's a lot more gameplay focused, I would say. SMT5 is, as you know, Persona is very story heavy, but also gameplay and day-to-day mechanics heavy. So it takes a while for that stuff to get rolling in, and it's a while before you even see your first dungeon or an actual boss fight. In the 6-7 hours I played of Metaphor Refantazio, there's like 3 to 4 boss fights and even optional fights. The game immediately gets rolling, and you don't have this weird thing where in Persona 5 they're introducing the characters and going to school and all that shit. The game, again, immediately gets rolling. You see a cutscene that sets up the stakes, and then your characters are introducing you as you go through the game of like what's going on, what's your mission, and who you are. And one really great addition is seeing the main character voiced. They were always kind of voiced in the actual like battle dialogue, but it's really funny to see some of the inflections when you're like being kind of sarcastic and stuff, and having an actual voice actor do it, it makes the jokes land quite a bit better and things like that, because you can still be an eccentric weirdo talking to other people so far in this game, and all those choices. And I imagine there's gonna be other choices based off of stats and stuff later on, but I do enjoy that the main character has an actual voice and a more outward personality. And one large change is that your character is not the main focus. You are the leader of sorts, and you've gained the special power and so forth, but it's not to the point where everyone's kind of coming up to you, or at least so far, being like, oh my god, leader, we're so useless without you, oh my god, leader, and instantly you're gaining everyone's respect. It feels a lot more earned as you're going through the story. And even you like talking to Stroll, and he's kind of leading you at the very beginning, and you're like kind of following his lead through combat and asking him like what his opinions are and whatnot. It's a really nice change having the main cast not be completely incompetent without you. Again, it's kind of like a whole tonal shift, and also this reflects in combat, where in this game if the main character dies, it doesn't game over immediately, which is a huge change. Not this series, but what inspired this game, right? In Persona and Shin Megami, anytime he lost the main character, that was fucking game over. And it was kind of a balancing thing, because the main character was a stupid powerhouse that could switch personas and whatnot, so they could be incredibly powerful, so them dying shouldn't be a thing that's happening. But you know, that series had a lot of weird one-shot mechanics, or you get caught off guard and you just have a bad fucking turn, and then your main character dies, and then your 3 chuckle fucks on your team can't do anything without you apparently, or throw a damn revive on you. No, it's game over. Here, hey, I'm really glad they stepped away from that, because I was playing thinking, oh god, if I die I'm gonna get a game over. So like I was boosting my evasion stats and making sure I was topped off in heals, and then eventually I got in a fight where my main character died, and I was like, oh, we're still fighting. And it ended up in this weird fight where like Hulkenberg was the last person alive, and I was barely surviving the fight because I was a dumbass, got in a fight I shouldn't have. The main character dying thing was always an annoying thing from the series, and I'm glad they've learned from it. And it seems like what this reminds me of, and how this whole thing is set up, is this game is just a Final Fantasy game, combat wise, because the personas or the archetypes you're using are just jobs. The way they act, the way that their passives work, all that stuff, and the way they level, and now you can swap between them and learn them. It's the job system. It is their take on the job system. So basically you have, when you learn all these different archetypes, you can switch between them and learn them, or spec into them on the character, and then carry over what passives you want to. Persona 2 was actually like this. Persona 1 and 2, in those games, everyone was the wild card, so everyone could switch between a large pool of personas you had. So this is like a lot more like that, but you're not having hundreds of demons, right? There's probably only gonna be like 20 jobs or whatever, 20 archetypes, and like advanced versions of them in the game. So you're switching through this pool of archetypes that can expand and grow and evolve, I think, into like different forms or more advanced forms. There's one at the very end of the trailer, or like when you beat the demo, there's a trailer that plays and it shows one of the archetypes, and I was like, of course that's in this fucking game. Of course this thing is in this fucking game, and I was so excited. I was pogging out when there was like no recording or anyone around. It was just me super excited, being like, yep, that is the job my main character is gonna play. I need to do everything in my power to get that job and make it work. So hey, yeah, no, super excited. The combat's really good. I was really curious how they're gonna story-wise do dungeons and make it so that hey, you need a certain amount of days to clear this dungeon, because how do you do that storytelling and writing wise? And I'm really interested to see how in every event they're going to change their reason, or figure out a reason why we have time to clear out the dungeon in 10 days or a month or whatnot. Like in the first case, it's a very simple like, oh, there's a magical spell and it's going to take time for them to clear it, so they're just in there in this fucking place taking control of it, and we're gonna work our way through the bottom and get to the top and try to beat this guy. So it makes sense story wise. With the first dungeon, it's like, okay, hey, I see what you're doing there, and it gives us the reason to be able to go in the dungeon and leave the dungeon and have days pass and get supplies and whatnot. That very Persona formula, right, where you're like constantly biting at the dungeon over time, unless you're a sicko like me who like does the dungeon in one fucking run and try to have as many days saved as possible. I really wonder how all that stuff is gonna be paced, as when you get the first dungeon, it is like, hey, you got 10 days, which is like, oh shit, 10 days? Okay. It's not Kamoshida like 40 fucking days or whatever it is, or 20 something days. Like, okay, we got some time here. So I really wonder how that stuff is going to be paced out. Like, hey, is every dungeon gonna be 10 days, or is it just this one is like the tutorial dungeon and everything else is 30 days to a month? However they want to do it, right? I'm really curious how the dungeon progression is going to be paced. I imagine there's parts of the dungeon you will get to and they'll be like, all right, well, we can't continue today, fucking leave. We got to figure out how to remove this spell ward or fucking rock or something like that, right? Just like in Persona 5, where you would hit points in the dungeon where they would make you leave because they were like, bitch, we ain't letting you do this in one day. Because that's what I would do in Persona 4, is I would just blitz that shit in one day. But yeah, It does seem a bit more difficult than like 5 is on normal mode. I might turn it up on hard. We'll see. Thankfully, you can turn it up and down at any time, it seems so. But yeah, digging the combat. It is. I mean, the combat is a mixture of Persona SMT because of how the turns work. And like if you miss, it's a big deal because that eats up 2 turns whenever you miss, and so forth. Whenever something resists you, the way they're like making a debuff called anxiety works is like really fucking brutal. And if an enemy attacks someone with anxiety, it doesn't waste their turn, so they just can keep doing it. I imagine on the harder difficulties that the AI probably just exploits the shit out of it and beats the shit out of you if someone's anxious. There's a lot of sorts of stuff that I'm interested in, but I think like the mixing of the archetypes and swapping through it is gonna be interesting because it's the job system. It's always been good, right? It's odd going into this like turn-based system and be like, oh wait, yeah, I've done this before. This is like what Final Fantasy used to be, and I've played it, and I've played quite a bit of bosses now. It's like, yeah, this is fun, this is good, I want to build on top of this. It's okay, hey, now I just need to see all the like the day-to-day Persona stuff and all that, and it's like, oh hey, is this good? And I imagine it is. Presentation wise, the game looks astounding. It has like this painterly effect to where it makes like things look blurry, but it's actually, when you look at the texture, it's like, oh, it's like a smudge, like a paint smudge you're putting on everything. And that's the whole world, right? It has like this painterly smudged effect on it, and some people are gonna hate it, some people are gonna love it. I personally love how this game looks, but you can tell when there are certain areas of the game where they're like, hey, we didn't put a ton of budget here because it's just a forest hallway or a cave mine. But whenever you go into the cities or the main dungeons and all that stuff, you're like, holy shit, this is incredible looking. But there's some early parts in like the demo or like the tutorial where you're like, that doesn't look great, because it looks very simple. It looks like every other forest you've looked at every other JRPG for the past 20 years type of stuff. But again, when you get to those cities and those main dungeons, you're like, oh. And then like just looking at the menus, and once you unlock the actual true menus in the game, you're like, oh hey, hi Persona UI designer, I see you're here too. Yeah, this looks incredible. What the crazy like Da Vinci shit you're doing, that shit, that whole vibe looks super cool. Yeah, I'm totally digging it. I'm mad that I beat that fucking demo now, because now I got 2 weeks of me being like, all right, yeah, I'm ready to play this game, but kind of blocked off. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, is the whole demo thing, right? This is like the 4th or 5th time now where a publisher has been like, okay, hey, just play the first act of the game. We're so confident that you're gonna like it, you're gonna buy it, right? Because when you think about it, right, a lot of these people are already in, and then there's a lot of people who are in already because it's like, oh, the creators of Persona, I was gonna buy this no matter what. But there are probably people who are like on the fence, or have never played one of these games before, but maybe they like the old turn-based games and whatnot, and they're like, oh, what is this thing? I'm not sure. It's a new IP and so forth. So there's lots of things to be like iffy about, and you're asking $70. Okay, and it's like, okay, well, play the first act, play like 3 to 4 dungeons and see if you like it or not. And I think if you get to the end of the demo, you're sold at that point. Either you're gonna buy the game when it comes out, or you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna eventually buy this. Because at that point, if you have beaten the demo, I doubt you beat it and be like, nah. Like, no, if you played that far and didn't lose interest at the beginning, you're in. You're gonna buy that fucking game. It's a very good thing to push people over the edge, especially new people. This whole like releasing the prologue and a demo thing. Final Fantasy 16 was the first one to do this, and Yoshi P was so goddamn smart. Praise be his name, Yoshi P. But it was a fucking genius idea of releasing the first act of the game, and especially 16, and how that game starts and how just fuck, and the way it cliffhangs. It's like a good first episode of a show, and you're like, well, fuck, I gotta see what happens next. And of course, you buy the fucking game. But he was also smart in being like, we have gameplay Andes too. So he added a whole demo section to that demo of like, okay, hey, you saw the story and what it can be and how spectacular it can be and whatnot. Okay, once you beat that, here's a demo part of like, hey, this is what a level and the structure and how fighting bosses and how this game plays and feels and works. This is the loop of the game. You're experiencing it now. You either like it or you don't. After the demo for 16, there's a lot of new people who never played Final Fantasy before and saw that and played that demo and were like, all right, I'm totally in. It totally sold a whole new generation of people. Then I imagine old Final Fantasy fans, this is a whole conversation for another time, I imagine like old school Final Fantasy fans, or those that were like on the edge and didn't really like the new direction, it probably pushed them the other way. But at least they got to see it and not be disappointed, right? Whenever they bought the game and then just didn't play it. Hey, they got to play some of it and be like, okay, hey, this is for me. Yes, no. Another game, Unicorn Overlord. I would have never bought Unicorn Overlord if the demo was not so incredible. If I would never give it the time of the day if I could not play 4 or 5 hours for free. Absolutely. Because like sometimes demos are not enough to like sink your teeth in and be like, do I really like this? No, Unicorn Overlord, I played a good chunk of the game and you got to get into that loop, right? And I think that's like the best thing is like, hey, showing the player, hey, what is the loop of this game? Do you like it? Okay, hey, you should probably buy us. And I think that's what 16 does incredibly well. I think that's what Unicorn Overlord does incredibly well. And I think that's what Metaphor does really well. I think Rebirth did the same thing as well, where they played the first portion of the game where you get to see some boss fights and you do like the whole Sephiroth prologue, but you get a base structure of like, hey, this is what this game is. And yeah, man, I think it's the way forward for demos. It was so funny for so many years. Demos were gone for quite a while where they were like pretty bad. But now we're coming in hot with these demos that are like, here's the first act of the game. And lots of the times it's a good sales pitch. And if the developer is doing their job right, when that demo ends, that player's gonna be like, I'm gonna play this game one day and buy it. Or I'm gonna buy it right now. It leaves it in their head being like, hey, they want more, rather than it being this giant $70 wall and they have no concept if they like it or not. And most people would be like, well, I don't know, so I'm just not going to buy it. And then they'll forget about it. Now they have at least some idea and maybe can plan at some point, hey, am I going to play this or not? So yeah, I think the like prologue demo thing that these developers have been doing in Japan is so goddamn smart and incredible. I hope the West starts utilizing this in the future, to where maybe we play an Assassin's Creed and play the first 3 to 4 hours or something like that, right? Just give us something to be like, hey, do I like this or not? Because right now, right, like let's say take Assassin's Creed for example, I have no interest in playing it. I've played the other ones before in the past and was like, this is all right, but I have no concept of this next one. But right now I'm defaulting to be like, nah, I'm not gonna play it. But if there was a demo, I played the first couple hours, there would be a chance of me being like, yes, I want more of this. But I don't know at the moment. And I think this demo stuff is a way of the future. And I can't wait for more developers and publishers to utilize this, because I think it's a really smart way to sell a game, especially a big game, large games. Because at the end of the day, these little small snippets of these massive games are nothing in the long run to what else is in those games. So it is a nice just taster. It's a nice little sprinkle of crack to be like, get you addicted and whatnot. And then the dealer comes back, you're like, hey, you want some more? Right now, Metaphor has completely sold me, and I am desperately waiting for October to disappear from the world for a couple days. Yo, I'm gone. But hey, did you play the demo? Did you play any other demos that were like this, where they like gave you the prologue or gave you the first check of the game? What did you think? How do you feel about it? Let me know down below, and I'll see you on the next random drop video. Peace.